He grew up in a small town where life was simple but hard. Most people worked from sunrise to sunset just to earn enough to eat. Dreams like becoming a musician or artist were seen as childish ideas that never led anywhere. But for him, music was not just a dream. It was his way of breathing. As a child, he was always drawn to sounds. When rain fell on the roof, he listened to the rhythm. When the wind blew through the trees, he imagined it as a melody. While other children played games in the streets, he would sit quietly and tap his fingers on empty cans, trying to make beats that made sense only to him. His family didn't have much. His father worked as a laborer, and his mother took in sewing jobs to keep food on the table. Money was always short, but their home was filled with warmth and love. He never asked for toys or new clothes. What he wanted most was a guitar, but that was something they could never afford. One day, when he was about 10, he was walking home from school when he noticed a pile of old junk behind a small repair shop. Among broken furniture and rusted metal, something caught his eye. A guitar, dusty and cracked, its strings missing, its wooden body half broken. Most people would have ignored it, but he couldn't take his eyes off it. He picked it up carefully, brushing away the dust. It didn't look like much, but in his hands it felt alive. The shop owner came out and saw him holding it. The man laughed softly and said, "That thing doesn't even make sound anymore." But the boy asked if he could have it. The owner shrugged. "If you really want it, take it. It's useless to me." That moment changed everything. He carried it home like it was a treasure. His mother looked at him surprised. "Where did you find that?" she asked. He smiled shyly. "It was thrown away, but I can fix it." She didn't stop him. She just said, "If it makes you happy, then keep it." And that's exactly what he did. He spent days trying to make it playable. He found bits of wire and old fishing line to use as strings. The sound that came out wasn't perfect. Sometimes it squeaked, sometimes it buzzed. But to him, it was magic. Every evening after finishing his homework, he would go outside and sit under the big neem tree behind his house. That became his stage, his world, his everything. He didn't know how to play properly, but his heart guided him. He taught himself by listening to songs on the radio and copying them one note at a time. When the sun went down and the stars came out, his music would float softly through the quiet streets. Some neighbors would stop to listen. Some smiled and said, "That boy has something special." But others were not so kind. "He's wasting his time," one man said. "Instead of studying, he's playing that broken thing." Even some of his schoolmates teased him. "You think you'll be a rock star with that junk?" They laughed. Their words stung, but he never answered back. He just played louder because that was the only voice he had. At school, things weren't easy either. He wasn't the best student, and teachers often told him to focus on real subjects. But one afternoon, while he was sitting alone under a tree, softly strumming his guitar, his music teacher passed by. The man stopped, listening quietly for a moment. When the song ended, he walked over and said, "You play from your heart. Don't stop doing that." Those simple words meant the world to him. For the first time, someone other than his mother believed in his talent. From that day, his confidence grew. He started practicing more seriously. He didn't have lessons or books, so he learned by watching performances on the small family TV, memorizing hand movements and trying them himself. His fingertips became rough and blistered, but the pain didn't matter. Each note he played felt like a step closer to his dream. Still, not everyone understood. His father often came home tired from work and saw his son sitting with the guitar. "You should be studying," he would say. "Music won't put food on the table." The boy didn't argue. He respected his father too much. But after everyone went to sleep, he would quietly sit by the window, softly plucking the strings until the moonlight faded. As time went by, he began playing small tunes at school events and family gatherings. People started noticing him, but not always in a good way. Some kids said he only wanted attention. Others whispered that he was pretending to be someone important. Yet deep down, he didn't care about fame or attention. He only wanted to play, to express the feelings he couldn't say in words. One rainy evening when he was about 14, something special happened. There was a small cultural festival in town. Local performers were invited, and the audience included teachers, students, and many families. He wanted to perform too, but when he told his classmates, they laughed. "You, with that broken guitar? You'll embarrass us all." Their words hurt more than he expected. For a moment he thought about giving up. When he got home, he sat silently by the window watching the rain. His mother noticed his face and asked, "What's wrong?" He told her everything, and the laughter, the teasing, the doubts. She didn't say much. She just smiled and said, "If you believe in your music, let it speak for you. Don't let anyone silence what you love." Her words lit something inside him. The next morning he went to the festival organizers and signed up to perform, despite all the mockery. He practiced every day until his fingers hurt. His father didn't say anything this time. Maybe he understood that his son wasn't going to stop. When the night of the performance came, the hall was crowded. The lights were bright and the noise of people talking filled the air. He stood backstage holding his old guitar tightly. His hands were shaking and his heart was pounding fast. He could hear the audience laughing and chatting, unaware of the nervous boy behind the curtain. When his name was announced, he stepped onto the stage slowly. The laughter began almost immediately. Some people in the crowd pointed at his broken guitar, whispering to each other. Others just stared, expecting him to fail. He took a deep breath and sat down on the stool. For a few seconds he looked at the crowd, then closed his eyes, and then he played. The first few notes were soft, almost trembling, but soon the melody grew stronger. It wasn't fancy or perfect, and it was pure emotion. His fingers moved gently, each note telling a story of loneliness, hope, and love. Slowly, the crowd grew silent. Even the ones who had laughed stopped talking. They could feel something real in his music, something words couldn't describe. When he finished, the hall was completely still for a moment. Then suddenly, everyone began clapping. The sound echoed across the room. Some people stood up, cheering and shouting his name. He looked up, stunned, not believing what was happening. At that moment, all the pain, all the mockery, all the doubt melted away. He had finally been heard. Not because of fame or wealth, but because of his heart. After the show, people came up to him, congratulating him and asking how he learned to play. He didn't have an answer. All he said was, "I just played what I felt." That night, when he returned home, his mother hugged him tightly. His father, who rarely showed emotion, placed his hand on his shoulder and said softly, "You made us proud." Those words meant more to him than any prize. As the night grew quiet, he took his guitar and went outside once more. Under the same old tree where his journey began, he played again. This time not for anyone else, but for himself. The stars twinkled above, and his melody drifted into the night like a whisper of gratitude. He didn't know what the future held, but deep down he knew one thing. As long as he had his music, he would never be alone, and no matter how many people tried to stop him, he would keep playing until the world listened. After that night, everything around him felt different. The performance had changed something deep inside him. It wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about finally being heard. For the first time in his life, people had listened to him without mocking or judging. But even after such a powerful moment, life didn't suddenly become easy. The next morning, he walked through the streets of his town with his guitar on his back, just like every other day. Some people smiled at him now and others nodded, pretending they had always believed in him. A few classmates who once laughed at him now wanted to talk to him. But he knew the truth. People respect success, not struggle. When he was just the boy with the broken guitar, nobody cared. Now that he had made the crowd cheer, they suddenly wanted to be close to him. He didn't let it get to his head. He was grateful for the attention, but he didn't start acting proud. He still walked the same roads, wore the same clothes, and practiced under the same tree. To him, that tree was a reminder of where it all started, the place where dreams began before anyone believed in them. At school, things began to change slowly. The principal called him into the office one day and congratulated him for his performance. "You made our school proud," he said, handing him a small certificate. It wasn't much, but it felt special. The same teachers who once told him to focus on real subjects now said things like, "Keep following your talent." But behind those kind words, not everyone was happy. Some of the other students, especially those who had lost in the competition, couldn't handle it. They whispered behind his back, saying, "He got lucky," or "The judges just felt sorry for him." He overheard them sometimes, and it hurt. He didn't understand why people couldn't just be happy for him, but instead of arguing, he kept quiet. He knew that real success doesn't come from proving others wrong. It comes from proving yourself right. In the evenings, he continued practicing. His guitar was still old and cracked, but he played it like it was made of gold. Sometimes when he closed his eyes, he could feel the music filling every corner of his heart. The world around him would disappear and there would only be sound, pure and honest. One afternoon while he was playing under the tree, a man passing by stopped to listen. He was dressed neatly and carried a small bag. When the boy finished his song, the man smiled and clapped softly. "You play beautifully," he said. "Where did you learn?" The boy shrugged shyly. "I just learned by myself." The man nodded, impressed. "Would you like to play at our town's annual fair next month? We need live performers." His heart almost skipped a beat. He couldn't believe what he just heard. The town fair was a big event. Hundreds of people came from nearby villages. It was a stage far bigger than his school's. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was ready, but then he remembered the promise he made to himself, to never let fear silence his music again. He accepted the offer. That night he told his mother about it. She looked at him with pride shining in her tired eyes. "You see," she said softly, "when you don't give up, life gives you chances." His father, sitting in the corner, nodded silently. For the first time there was no disapproval in his eyes, only quiet respect. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Every morning before school and every evening after dinner, he practiced for hours. He didn't have any fancy setup or proper equipment, just his old guitar, his voice, and his determination. His fingers hurt so much that he had to wrap them in cloth sometimes, but he didn't stop. He knew this performance could change everything. When the day of the fair arrived, the whole town buzzed with excitement. The air smelled of food, the lights shimmered across the tents, and music from loudspeakers filled the space. He stood backstage, nervous but calm. The stage was much bigger than he was used to, and the crowd seemed endless. He could hear laughter, chatter, and the sound of applause as other performers finished their acts. He looked down at his guitar, the same broken one he had repaired years ago. The wood had faded and the strings were worn out, but he felt it was a part of him now. As his turn came closer, his heart began to pound. The event organizer came up to him and said, "Are you ready?" He nodded, even though his hands were trembling. When he walked onto the stage, a wave of light hit his eyes. The crowd looked huge. Some people recognized him from the school contest and whispered among themselves, "Is that the boy who played with the broken guitar?" One woman said, "Let's see if he's still that good." Another man replied. He stood in the center of the stage, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. For a few seconds there was silence, the kind that makes your heart race. Then he began to play. The first chord echoed through the speakers, soft but clear. Slowly the noise in the crowd faded. His fingers moved smoothly now, each note more confident than the last. His voice joined the melody, gentle, emotional, filled with honesty. He sang about struggle, about not giving up, about finding light even when everyone tries to put it out. As the song went on, something magical happened. People who were walking past the stage stopped. Children, old men, women, they all turned their heads and listened. The sound of his music carried something pure, something real. You could feel it, a kind of truth that doesn't need words. Even those who had once laughed at him were now silent, staring in awe. By the time the song ended, the crowd erupted in applause. Some stood up, clapping and cheering. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a few moments he couldn't move. Then a tear rolled down his cheek, not from sadness, but from the feeling of being seen, truly seen. After the show, people came up to meet him. The organizer told him, "You were the best performance of the night." A local newspaper reporter even took his photo and asked for his story. He didn't know what to say except, "I just love music." That one sentence summed up everything he had been through. When he got home that night, the fair was still echoing in his mind. He placed his guitar carefully beside his bed and sat quietly. His mother came into the room and said, "You played beautifully. The whole town is talking about you." He smiled softly and said, "It's just the beginning." But deep inside, he knew there would still be challenges. Not everyone would support him. Some would envy him, some would doubt him, and some would try to pull him down again. But now he had something they couldn't take away: belief in himself. In the days that followed, small changes began happening. A few local cafes asked him to play on weekends. Students from other schools invited him to perform. He even started earning small amounts of money for his performances. It wasn't much, but for him it was proof that dreams could turn into something real. He saved every bit of money he made, and after a few months, he finally bought a new guitar. When he brought it home, he placed it next to his old one. He didn't throw the old one away, he couldn't. It was a reminder of how far he had come. Sometimes he would still play it just to feel that same raw, honest sound that had started everything. One evening, as he sat under his tree again, he looked up at the stars and thought about the journey so far. He remembered the days when everyone laughed at him, the nights when he almost gave up, and the moments when music was his only friend. Now people clapped for him, cheered for him, and respected him. But even with all the new attention, he remained humble. He never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped playing for himself first. Because for him, music wasn't about fame or money. It was about emotion, connection, and the power to touch someone's heart. That night, as his soft tune filled the air, an old man passing by stopped to listen. After the song ended, the man said, "Your music makes people feel something. That's rare. Never lose that." The boy smiled and replied, "I won't. It's all I have." And as he watched the old man walk away, he realized something. His music had begun to travel beyond his small town. People were listening, truly listening. And that was just the beginning of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. He stood backstage clutching his old guitar, the same one he had found years ago near a garbage pile. It still had scratches, its strings slightly rusty, and one of the frets was uneven. But for him, it wasn't just an instrument, but it was a part of his soul. The sound of laughter and chatter from the audience reached his ears, and though he tried to stay calm, his heart beat faster than ever. It wasn't fear of losing. It was the fear of not being heard. He looked around at the other contestants, each holding shiny guitars, dressed neatly, tuning their instruments like professionals. Some of them glanced at him and smirked. One even whispered loud enough for others to hear, "He's still using that broken thing? What a joke." The group chuckled, and he quietly stepped back, pretending not to care. But inside, the words hit hard. It wasn't the first time he had heard them. People had always made fun of him, laughed at his dreams, and told him he was wasting his time. Yet deep down, he believed that music didn't come from perfect instruments. It came from imperfect hearts that had something real to say. As his turn got closer, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered his mother's soft voice telling him, "Don't play to impress, play to express." Those words became his strength. He wasn't there to compete or to prove anything. He was there to let his music speak for him. When his name was finally called, the lights dimmed slightly and the crowd grew quieter. He walked onto the stage slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on him. The large hall felt colder than before. He sat on a small stool at the center, adjusted the mic, and placed the guitar on his lap. A few laughs echoed from the back rows when the light hit his instrument, revealing its old body and worn strings. Even one of the judges raised an eyebrow, clearly doubtful. He smiled gently as if those reactions didn't exist and tuned the guitar softly. The sound wasn't perfect and one of the strings buzzed slightly, but he knew how to make it sing despite its flaws. For a moment he looked down at his hands. They weren't smooth like a trained musician's. They were rough, tired hands, but they held more emotion than any polished performer could show. Then with one deep breath he began to play. The first note came out soft, trembling slightly, like the voice of a child learning to speak. But then it started to flow, gentle, emotional, pure. The melody filled the room slowly, wrapping around everyone like a quiet whisper of memory. The sound carried pain, hope, and honesty. Every string he touched seemed to tell a story, of struggle, of silent nights under the tree, of all the laughter and rejection he had faced. At first, the crowd didn't know how to react. The music wasn't loud or fast. It wasn't showy or flashy like the other performances. It was something different, something that spoke directly to the heart. The hall grew quieter. Even the people who had laughed earlier found themselves listening. Then something magical happened. The judges leaned forward. The same people who had doubted him began to focus, trying to understand how this old guitar could produce such feeling. His fingers moved with grace, not speed. Each note carried emotion so real that it made people forget the scratches on the instrument. The music rose and fell, like waves carrying his soul across the room. One of the judges blinked rapidly, almost emotional. The melody reminded her of her own childhood, of the times when her father played music for her. Another member of the audience wiped a tear without realizing it. There was something in the sound, something human, raw, and true. He wasn't thinking about the competition anymore. He wasn't thinking about winning or losing. He was lost in the music. For him, every note was a release and a pain of years of mockery, of hidden dreams. It was as if all his emotions had been waiting for this one moment to be set free. As he reached the middle of his song, the tempo changed slightly. The melody became more powerful, rising like a heartbeat filled with courage. It spoke of strength, of never giving up, of finding beauty even in brokenness. The crowd sat still, eyes fixed on him, not daring to interrupt the moment. Even those who once doubted him, the same students who used to tease him, now watched in silence, their faces softening. They couldn't look away. The boy they had laughed at was now commanding the entire hall without saying a single word. His music did the talking. His guitar, once mocked for its flaws, was now producing a sound that no new instrument could match, because it carried a story inside it. When he reached the final part of his piece, he slowed down again. The soft notes returned, gentle and emotional. The melody faded like a sigh, peaceful, complete. As the last string vibrated and the final note hung in the air, the entire hall remained silent. For a moment there was no sound, not even a whisper. Then suddenly someone from the back started clapping. It was followed by another, then another, until the whole hall erupted in applause. People stood on their feet, cheering and whistling. The sound of appreciation filled the space louder than any song before. Even the judges rose, clapping with genuine respect. He looked up, shocked. For a few seconds, he didn't know how to react. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized they weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. They had felt what he wanted to say. His music had spoken louder than their doubts. As the applause continued, he smiled faintly and bowed his head. That moment was worth every hardship, every insult, every lonely night spent practicing. He had dreamed of being heard, and now not only had they heard him, they understood him. After leaving the stage, several contestants approached him, no longer mocking but curious. One said, "That was beautiful. I've never heard something like that before." Another added softly, "You played with your heart, not your hands." He just nodded, still overwhelmed, unable to speak. Later, as he sat outside the hall under the evening sky, he looked at his guitar resting beside him. The crowd's cheers still echoed in his mind. The wind brushed softly against his face. For the first time, he felt peace. It wasn't about winning or proving himself anymore. He had already won in a much deeper way. He realized that real music didn't need fancy instruments or expensive lessons. It needed truth. It needed soul. And that night, he had given the world a piece of his. As he packed his guitar and started walking home, he heard someone call his name. It was one of the judges, the same one who had doubted him at the beginning. She walked up, smiling kindly, and said, "You reminded me why I fell in love with music. Don't ever stop playing." He thanked her, his voice barely steady, and promised that he never would. That night, under the streetlights, he walked with a light heart. The broken guitar in his hand no longer felt heavy. It felt alive. It had carried his voice to hundreds of hearts and silenced every doubt around him. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but this moment proved one thing, and sometimes, even the broken can create the most beautiful sound. And as he disappeared into the quiet night, his fingers brushed the strings once more. The soft hum of music followed him down the road, a song not just for others but for himself, the sound of belief, of hope, and of a dream that refused to die. The morning after the competition, he woke up with a smile that wouldn't fade. The sound of the crowd's cheers still echoed in his mind like a beautiful dream. For years, he had imagined people listening to his music, not mocking it but truly feeling it. Now that dream had become real. He touched his old guitar gently, still amazed at how something so broken had brought him this far. He stepped outside his small home and walked down the same dusty street he had walked for years. But this time everything felt different. Neighbors who once ignored him now greeted him with smiles. One of them said, "We saw you play last night. You made us proud." Another added, "That music, it touched my heart." Their words warmed him, but more than that, they gave him a quiet satisfaction, not of pride, but of peace. That day, He sat under his favorite tree, the same place where he had learned to play as a child. The sunlight fell through the leaves, dancing over the strings of his guitar. He strummed softly, playing the same melody that had won everyone's hearts. But this time he played not for approval, he played for himself. The sound drifted across the open field, calm and free. Soon, children from the neighborhood gathered around him, curious and excited. One of them asked, "Can you teach us how to play?" He smiled and nodded. That afternoon, he taught them how to hold the guitar, how to listen to the rhythm, and most importantly, how to feel the music instead of just hearing it. Their laughter filled the air as they tried, failed, and tried again. For him, it was the most beautiful sound, because it meant his music was growing, spreading, touching new hearts. Days turned into weeks, and the story of his performance spread far beyond his small town. Someone who had recorded his competition performance uploaded it online. Within days, it reached thousands of people. Comments poured in, people from different places saying how deeply his music had moved them. Some said it reminded them of their own struggles. Others said it gave them hope. One afternoon, while he was tuning his guitar, his phone rang. It was a call from a local music school. The director had seen his performance and wanted to meet him. When he went there, he felt nervous again, walking into a place filled with professionals, instruments, and students who had been trained for years. But instead of judging him, they welcomed him warmly. The director said, "Your music speaks to people. We'd like to offer you a scholarship. You deserve a stage where your sound can grow." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A scholarship? For years he had dreamed of learning music properly but could never afford it. And now it was being offered to him freely, not because of his wealth or background, but because of his heart. Tears filled his eyes as he accepted the offer. His journey in the music school began humbly. Everything was new to him. Sheet music, theory, and techniques he had never heard of. At times he struggled to keep up with others. Some students were faster, more polished. But what set him apart was the emotion in his playing. Even his teachers noticed it. They said, "You may not know all the technical rules yet, but you know how to touch souls." Months passed, and he improved quickly. His fingers became more skilled, his ear more sensitive, and his understanding of rhythm deeper. But even as he learned, he never forgot the place where it all began. The small town, the tree, the laughter, the loneliness, the broken guitar. He often visited his old neighborhood, bringing his guitar and teaching children who still waited for him every weekend. Soon, invitations began to pour in. Local events, small concerts, and even radio shows wanted him to perform. The same boy who was once told to stop playing was now being celebrated everywhere. Each performance brought him closer to people's hearts. His humble nature, his soft-spoken words, and his pure love for music made everyone admire him. One evening, he got invited to perform at a big city concert. It was his first time stepping onto such a grand stage. Bright lights, thousands of people, and cameras everywhere. Backstage, he looked at his guitar. It was still the same old one, though he now had new instruments too. But he decided to use that same broken guitar for the concert. It was a symbol of everything he had endured. When he walked on stage, the crowd welcomed him with loud cheers. He took a deep breath and smiled. He looked around on so many faces, so many lights, but in that moment he felt calm. He sat down, closed his eyes, and began to play. The music floated gently through the hall. Every note told his story, the laughter, the pain, the hope. The audience listened quietly, feeling every vibration. Halfway through, he paused, looked up, and spoke into the mic softly. "They tried to stop me once," he said. "They said music wouldn't take me anywhere. But I realized something. Music doesn't need permission. It just needs a heart to live in." The crowd applauded, some standing up. Then he continued to play, this time stronger, freer, louder. His fingers moved with passion, his eyes closed, lost in the rhythm. The hall seemed to breathe with him. When he finished, the silence that followed was heavy with emotion, the kind that only true art creates. Then once again, applause filled the air. People cheered, shouted, and clapped until their hands hurt. That night, when he walked off stage, reporters rushed to him wanting to know his story. But he didn't talk about fame or success. He talked about the days when no one believed in him, about the nights he spent alone practicing, and about how his music had been his only friend. He said, "I don't play for applause. I play for those who have lost hope, to remind them that beauty can come even from broken things." His story spread far and wide. Newspapers wrote about him, calling him the boy who played his heart out. Music channels featured his journey, and many people came forward to help him record his first album. He dedicated that album to his mother, who had once told him, "Play to express, not to impress." The album became an instant hit, not because of fame or marketing, but because every song carried truth. Listeners felt his sincerity in every chord, every pause, every breath. His songs became a comfort to people going through hard times. He received messages from strangers saying his music had given them strength to keep going. But despite all the success, he remained humble. He still returned to his small town, sat under that same tree, and played for anyone who wanted to listen. He repaired his old guitar but never replaced it. It was his reminder of where he came from, proof that even something broken could create something beautiful. Years later, at another concert, he stood before a crowd much bigger than any he had seen before. Before starting his song, he looked at the audience and said with a smile, "You don't need a perfect life to make something meaningful. You just need to believe in your own sound." As he played, thousands of lights shone in the crowd, waving gently to his rhythm. Tears glistened in many eyes. His journey had come full circle, from a boy mocked for his dream to a man whose music had healed hearts. When the concert ended, he walked off the stage, holding his guitar close to his chest. He knew that this wasn't just his victory. It belonged to every person who had ever been told they weren't enough, every dreamer who had been laughed at, every soul who had ever felt small, because in the end, he had proven one simple truth: when your heart speaks honestly, even the loudest voices of doubt fall silent. And through his music, he had done exactly that. He didn't just silence his haters. He made them listen.